My name is Kyle Black. When I was in 5th grade, a new kid transferred to my class. One day, a trio of bullies started picking on the new girl, Ava West. "Hey, newbie, say something." Ava, being petite and slim, was an easy target. Taking advantage of her quiet nature, they'd tease her daily, always managing to fluster her. Having watched this day in, day out, I finally mustered the courage and said, "Enough is enough. What's your deal, trying to be a hero?" Tom, the leader of the trio, quickly shifted his attention to me. "Yeah, what's Monkey Face here trying to prove? Monkey should just stick to making monkey sounds." The other two joined in, echoing Tom's taunts. "What's it to you if I look like a monkey? Haven't your fathers ever told you that men are supposed to protect their mothers and other girls? Ava just got here. We should be kind to her." Now that I am an adult, I would be a little embarrassed by this line, but at the time I thought it was the norm. Predictably, the three bullies didn't just stop. They teased me, too. But their words never bothered me, because I deeply admired my father. My father was a big, strong man, but in front of me, he would stroke my head while squinting his eyes as if they were about to melt away. He worked in construction. As a kid, I often visited his work sites with my mom, bringing him lunch. I've seen him lifting heavy things with such ease multiple times. I idolized my strong yet gentle father and often said, "I want to be a strong man like Dad," to which he'd reply, "Being strong isn't just about muscles, it's about protecting those weaker than you." His words came naturally to me in my confrontation with the bullies. Of course, they didn't stop, continuing to taunt Ava. I couldn't stand seeing Ava, always on the brink of tears, so I started accompanying her to and from school. She was a woman of few words, often nodding or shaking her head in response. She always looked down and pressed her lips tightly together, making it hard for her to fit in with the more outgoing girls. But Ava was genuine, and I enjoyed her company. We became closer over that year and the next, but in middle school, we went to different schools. Ava moved to the neighboring state due to her father's job. "I'll write you letters," she promised. How happy I was when Ava told me that. And true to her word, we exchanged letters. Looking back, it was quite a youthful period. Exchanging letters with a girl during the height of adolescence. To be honest, Ava was the only girl I was ever close to. One day, 13 years after graduation, I received a notice for a reunion under the title, "Let's have a reunion now that we are about twice our age since graduation." The quirky theme made me chuckle, and I decided to attend. At the venue, I was thrilled to see familiar faces. As I chatted with old friends, I noticed a group in flashy suits. Looking a little further away, I see a group of people wearing fancy suits. It was the trio of bullies. The most eye-catching of them was Tom. As I laughed at his flirtatious appearance, Tom hasn't changed either. Feeling nostalgic inside, I locked eyes with Tom. "Hey, you're Kyle, right? You haven't changed a bit." Tom, with his buddies, approached me, laughing. I can easily tell it's Kyle, with his red face and monkey. The way he is in a groove hasn't changed since elementary school. The banner went on with them reminiscing about my monkey face. While it was a fun reunion with the trio, it seems I made a mistake in making eye contact at that moment. That trio seemed to be bragging to everyone about which universities they had attended. Now, I wasn't embarrassed or anything. I just thought that amidst their discussions of which university was better or worse, I'd definitely be the odd one out. "So, Kyle, which university did you go to?" I had tried to stay out of it, but I knew this question was coming. I honestly replied that I started working right after high school. "What? There are guys these days who don't go to college?" Tom exclaimed in surprise and announced to everyone, "This guy didn't go to college." I'd like to believe he was just being his old playful self. I heard some chuckles. From what I gathered, most of the group had attended college. Tom himself had graduated from a fairly well-known university. Man, with that face and no college degree, life must be tough. Tom joked. Hey, my face has nothing to do with it, I quickly retorted. But Tom continued, looking somewhat concerned. Without a degree, you probably can't find a good job, and your pay must be low. I replied honestly, it's not like that, really. Though it might have come off as defensive. Some folks expressed sympathy, others teased. I wasn't struggling by any means. Anyway, I just said thank you to end the conversation. As the reunion ended, we headed outside. Hey everyone, how about some karaoke for the after party? Tom enthusiastically called out. A few wanted to head home, and the ladies decided to have their own after party. In the end, only the guys were left. Tom is disappointed that the girls didn't stay, but then he says he will take them to a nearby bar that Tom frequents. As I check my watch, deciding whether to join or not, Tom encouraged, "Come on, Kyle, join us." I thought, why not? It's not often I get to catch up with these guys. With a note that I might head home early, I followed the group to the bar. Tom's favorite bar had an international vibe, with waitress and customers from various countries. As we walked in, everyone was in awe, exclaiming, "Wow, this place is cool." After Tom conversed with the waitress, he was led to a large table in the back of the bar. Tom had pre-booked a large table in the back. Everyone was excited to see a bar that they had never been to before. The rumor that Tom had a thing for foreign women. That is why he often comes to this bar. This is Michelle. Tom introduced the waitress who came to our table. Oh my, Tom, how many girls do you say mine about? Michelle's fluent retort made everyone laugh. The bar was lively, with music playing. We could chat with the waitress, mingle with other customers, or just enjoy ourselves as a group. Everyone seemed to be having a blast. After a while, a stunning blonde woman entered the bar. With long blonde hair, revealing clothes, and a beautifully styled woman, Tom couldn't help but let out an "oh." Following Tom's gaze, we all turned to look. She looked around, and when our eyes met, she gave a slight wave and a smile. I immediately stood up, intending to leave, and said, "Well then." "Oh damn," she waved at me. Tom interrupted, clearly excited. Everyone around me cheered. "Well, then," looking at me, Tom said, "Perfect timing. Kyle, why don't you go and pick her up?" I was taken aback. "What?" Tom looks thrilled. With a gleeful expression, Tom suggested, "Let's play a game. Let's see if Kyle can hit on her speaking French." Everyone joined in the excitement. It all happened so fast, and I was completely caught off guard, but everyone seemed to be having fun, so I went along with it. The others started adding rules, like whoever thought I'd fail would cover my drinks. As they discussed, they doubted my looks and French skills. "That's not even a game." Laughter erupted, but they said it seemed fun, so I should go for it. "Let's see how far your high school French can take you. Go." Before I knew it, a game involving me had begun. I got caught up in the hype and said, "No way," as I approached the blonde beauty at the counter. "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a second? Everyone's been telling me to go pick on you." When I said that, she said, "What? What do you mean?" Then she was so surprised that she started to laugh. She glanced at everyone seated and then looked at me with a mischievous smile. "Oh, I see what's going on." "Sure." As I walked with her to everyone's table, they all said, "No way." They rolled my eyes and were amazed that I could communicate in French. "Good evening. You called me over." She asks everyone in French, but they must have been stunned by her breathtaking beauty. All anyone could say was, "Well." But only Tom seemed delighted, saying, "She looks even cuter up close." "Thanks, Kyle. Oh, come here, baby." Seems like that's Tom's usual pickup line, as he spread his arms wide, beckoning her over. She laughed out loud. As she took her time getting to him, Tom reached out to grab her hand. "Why would I come to you? Don't get the wrong idea." When she said this, everyone looked at her with an "what" look and became quiet. That's because the words she uttered were in fluent English. "You're Tom, right? That's George next to you, and Tyler over there. I recognized all three of you right away." She mentioned only those three names in the room, but given her fluent English and her ability to name them, everyone seemed to be in shock. Seeing everyone's reaction, she locked eyes and burst into laughter. "Sorry, everyone, but don't you remember? It's Ava West." When I said that, everyone was silent for a moment, then exclaimed in unison, "No way. Are you that Ava?" Amid the surprise, Ava smirked. "No, darling. It's Ava Black now." Hearing that, everyone blinked in astonishment, falling silent again for a few moments. Then, a collective "what" echoed throughout the room, drawing the attention of other customers. Ava playfully wrapped her arm around mine, smiling brightly. Actually, Ava couldn't make it to the reunion because of work, but she finished up and came to pick me up. I tried explaining to everyone, but they seemed lost. Ava must have been tired from work, but when I briefly emailed her about attending an after-party, she replied, "I'll pick you up." The truth is, I still have some work to do after I get home. On Saturday nights, it's hard to hail a cab, so I took advantage of Ava's kindness. Everyone kept saying, "I didn't recognize Ava, she's become so beautiful." Indeed, Ava in elementary school was short and petite, and always looked down, very timid. I was plain back then, but the trio hasn't changed much. I recognized you guys instantly. Besides, I remember what you did to me. When Ava said that, Tom and his friends looked awkward. Ava had just returned from France at the time. Her father was American, and her mother was French. Due to her father's job, she had lived in France for a long time and barely knew basic English. She had been mocked for her intonation, which made her even more reluctant to speak. I was sad every day back then. When Ava told the three of them this, they sincerely apologized, saying, "We're sorry. But thanks to you guys, I was so frustrated not knowing English that I studied a lot. Now, as you can see, I'm fluent. You apologized, so I forgive you." When Ava smiled and said that, Tom and everyone else broke into smiles too. "Hold on a second, did someone just say Ava Black? Does that mean?" Tom suddenly became serious, looking at everyone's faces. "The two of you are married? No way, that's obviously a joke. Come on, it's obvious you two are Beauty and the Beast." Everyone was saying they couldn't believe it, but at the mention of Beast, there was a burst of laughter. Then, Ava casually remarked, "What? I think my darling is the most handsome man in the world." Everyone was holding their stomachs and laughing, saying, "What are you talking about? And there must be some mistake. Come on, there are popular guys who look like monkeys. Look at some celebrities, actors, and such." When I threw in that comment, everyone started laughing even harder, gasping for breath. Give me a break. Even if I look like a monkey, it's not the same thing. I meant it seriously, but it seemed to hit everyone's funny bone. What everyone was curious about next was how Ava and I got to the point of marriage. Ava had moved out of state when she started middle school. Everyone only remembered her up until our elementary school graduation, so it wasn't strange for them to think that was when Ava and I last had contact. When she moved, she told me, "I'll write you letters," and that's how our correspondence started. I became interested in French because of Ava, and she wanted to learn English, so our letters were written in both French and English every time. We would look up words for each other, and, though the exchanges were awkward, learning new words was fun. We shared our middle school lives in our letters. Once we hit high school, we had a bit more freedom. About once a month, I went to hang out with Ava. Maybe because we couldn't meet during middle school. When I saw Ava for the first time in high school, my heart raced. She had grown taller, and her hair, which was shoulder length at elementary school graduation, had grown to her waist. She had become more ladylike. Turned out, we both had feelings for each other at that time. But I had no idea about it back then and kept those feelings to myself. By that time, I had a pretty rugged face, almost monkey-like. My face was so red that I even thought maybe in my past life I was some kind of monkey. I had no confidence in my looks, especially since Ava was becoming more and more beautiful. With her blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and fair skin, I thought she was way out of my league. So, when I found out Ava liked me, I was overjoyed but also very surprised. As for Ava, she was waiting for me to confess my feelings. But whenever we met, we just hung out as friends. Every time after hanging out, she went home feeling upset, I later learned. Then, during the summer of our sophomore year in high school, she suddenly got mad while we were hanging out, saying, "I'm not meeting with you anymore." Hanging out as usual, suddenly Ava got mad. "Why? What's wrong?" I only panicked. Then, puffing up her cheeks, Ava said, "Well then, tell me you love me right now." It was at that moment I realized Ava and I had mutual feelings. To my surprise, Ava looked even more shocked. "How did you not notice? You love me too, don't you, Kyle?" With her words, I could only nod, and Ava gave a beaming smile. Just moments ago she was pouting, and now she has this killer smile. I was caught off guard by the change and couldn't help but smile. "Then say it properly. Say you love Ava right now." Of course, I wanted to say it right then and there. But we were at a bustling town square. No way could I say it without being super embarrassed. "Come on, don't keep me waiting. Say it now." Really? Here of all places. I was embarrassed and said, "I'll tell you later," but I could tell by the look on Alice's face. She wouldn't let me go home unless I said it. I must have been beet red. "I love you, Ava." It was my first ever confession of love. I was thrilled when Ava became my girlfriend, but I still lacked confidence in myself. One day, I asked her, "Aren't you embarrassed to be with someone like me?" Ava widened her eyes and exclaimed, "Why would you think that? You look so ruggedly handsome. Plus, you have a strong and kind heart. Remember when I just transferred schools and you helped me out? Since that moment, Kyle, in my eyes, you've been the coolest guy ever." Ava looked straight at me and reassured me like that. From then on, I gained confidence in myself. Our relationship continued as a couple, and after high school graduation, Ava went off to college while I joined my family's construction company, where my father was the CEO. I considered going to college, but having acquired specialized training and certifications in high school, I was eager to start working right away. And so, I waited for Ava's college graduation to propose. We happily became husband and wife. I briefly shared our love story with everyone. "You see, my darling is the best husband in the world." At Ava's sincere gushing, everyone started to blush and said, "Oh, stop it. Kyle, I should have been better. I admit my mistakes." Tom scratched his head, smiling slightly. If I hadn't teased her and been kinder, maybe Ava would have been my wife. No way. I love someone wild and gentle like my darling. Tom seemed a bit regretful hearing that. However, when he said he'd drink too much if he heard any more of this lovey-dovey talk, everyone laughed and told him to head home early. Let's toast to the couple's happiness. "Yeah, Kyle, drinks are on us tonight." In the end, they told me, "Kyle, make sure you keep her happy," and we parted ways with smiles all around. It's been 2 years since that reunion. I've been working hard every day, preparing to take over the family business for my father. Ava has fulfilled her dream and opened a nail salon. She looks happy every day. We both lead busy lives, but fulfilling. Right now, It's just the two of us, but we hope to have kids someday. Our current dream is to live happily in the house I built. We're taking it one step at a time, working together to make our dreams come true. My name is David. I'm just an average office worker. I'm not really into standing out, so I'm pretty quiet at the office. I just get through the work given to me, and if I finish without mistakes, I consider it a job well done. While my colleagues are hustling to climb the corporate ladder, I'm not really interested in promotions. I just hope for a peaceful day, every day. Luckily, I ended up working for a top-tier company. I rarely have to work overtime, and I think my salary is pretty decent compared to others at my age. My days are pretty much the same. I just go to work and come home every day. Cook up a simple meal, enjoy my dinner while watching TV, and then head to bed. But maybe this monotonous life is what happiness is all about. That's what I've been thinking. I don't have a family anymore. Both my parents have passed away. I still remember that time. I was in second grade. That day, both my parents had the day off, and they went out in their car, saying they had some major shopping to do. They said they'd be back by the time I got home from school, but they weren't back by evening. As night fell, a neighbor lady, Mrs. Wilson, approached me. I had been sitting in front of the house for hours, so she probably got concerned. When I explained the situation, she took me to the nearby police station. I don't know what Mrs. Wilson told them, but I remember the police suddenly getting very busy. They told me that my parents might have been in an accident. I was taken to the hospital by the police. However, upon arrival, I was told the devastating news that both my parents had died. The only thing I remember from the hospital was seeing the bodies of my mom and dad. I can't recall what happened after, like the funeral or what happened to our house. Maybe the mental shock was too big, as I seemed to have lost some of my memories. Next thing I knew, I was in an orphanage. I had no grandparents or relatives, so I had nowhere else to go. There were other kids in the facility, but I didn't really interact with them. I just followed the rules set by the staff and kept to myself. I stayed at the orphanage until I turned 18 and moved out after graduating high school. Maybe I should go to college was my main thought. With that in mind, I went on to college. Thanks to the savings and insurance money left by my parents, I could attend college without financial worries. Go to school, work a part-time job, come home and sleep. I became less talkative after my parents' death, and that hasn't changed even now as an adult. I guess I've always avoided interacting with people. Being bad at expressing my emotions probably didn't help. I've never really had close friends, let alone a significant other, mostly just acquaintances. I had always thought I'd probably end up being single, and I was okay with being alone. Even though I was just living an ordinary life, something unexpected happened one day. I'll never forget it. It was when I turned 30. On that day, I was working as usual. Things were going smoothly, and I was having a rather laid-back day. I decided to get some office supplies from the supply cabinet. To my surprise, we were running low on a lot of items. Normally, the newer employees would restock the supplies, but I thought, since I had some time, why not do it myself? So I said, I've got some free time, I'll go get the supplies, and headed to the supply room. As I switched on the light and entered the room, I began to load up a cart with supplies from my list. Then, a woman from another department walked in. Our eyes met, and we gave each other a courteous nod. Wow, a pretty girl just walked in. That's what crossed my mind instantly. It wasn't a crush or anything, but I found myself wondering, is she from the next department? I don't recall such a pretty girl working here. Taking a closer look, she had these cute beauty marks under her eyes, which made her already cool-looking eyes appear even more attractive. No, don't keep staring. It'd be so embarrassing if she caught me. I realized I'd been unintentionally staring and felt a rush of embarrassment. Taking a brief, deep breath, I composed myself and went back to collecting the supplies. But then, it happened. Suddenly, there was a deep rumbling sound, followed by a strong side-to-side shake. It was an earthquake. The shaking grew more intense. Being in the supply room, there was a high risk of things falling down. The spot where she and I were located was at the back of the supply room. The exit was too far, and with the intense shaking, it felt too risky to make a dash for it. Cover your head. Use a basket or turn a box upside down and protect yourself, I shouted instinctively. The tremor felt like it lasted forever, but thanks to the fixed shelves in the supply room, a major disaster was avoided. Supplies were scattered all over the place, but neither of us got hurt. "Are you okay?" I rushed over and asked her. She seemed fine, replying, "Yay, that was quite a shock. It lasted quite a while, didn't it?" She slowly got up and added, "It's quite a mess here, but maybe we should head outside first and check on others." Concerned about potential aftershocks and with the supply room door still closed, I started heading towards the door. "Oops, sorry." She bumped into my back. "Something wrong, though." Looking at the storage room door, I was taken aback and stood there. She leaned over from behind me and was equally stunned. To our disbelief, cardboard boxes that had been piled near the door had collapsed, blocking our exit and the path to the door. To make matters worse, it seemed a box had opened, scattering promotional items all over the place. "We can't get out this way. Should we clean this up?" She agreed with a sigh. I started moving the heavier boxes, asking her to pick up the lighter promotional items. "Why of all places did it have to block the door?" She complained, but continued neatly placing the scattered items back into the boxes. "Just hang on a bit longer. We'll clear a path to the door soon." I rolled up my sleeves, ready for some heavy lifting. "All right, once we move this, we can get the door open." At last, we cleared a path to the door. Thinking we could finally leave, I twisted the doorknob and pushed. Thud. "Huh?" A dull noise echoed, and despite several attempts, the door would only open a few inches. "This isn't good," I murmured to myself. Peeking through the small gap in the door, I saw a cart loaded with supplies blocking it from the other side. Other boxes had fallen over in the corridor, making it even harder to access. The cardboard boxes and cart had gotten jammed in such a way that the door wouldn't open. I tried jostling the door multiple times, but it wouldn't budge. "We're stuck," I sighed, feeling a wave of despair. But on the bright side, other co-workers are still around. Someone will eventually come. So, I decided to team up with her and start cleaning up the scattered promotional items and supplies. "We really got trapped, huh?" she teased, noticing my involuntary sighs, and said in a cheery voice. "Yeah, I really thought we'd get out," I responded, laughing. However, our conversation was brief. We silently continued our tasks. As I was thinking we were nearly done, an unmistakable growling sound broke the silence. I turned my head towards the sound. She looked embarrassed as she held her stomach. "That was mine. Did you hear that?" Her face turned beet red with embarrassment. "Yes, I heard it loud and clear." I said it honestly, and we both burst out laughing. Although we were strangers, that little moment of laughter lightened the mood. While continuing to tidy up, we chatted a bit and shared our names and departments. Her name was Sarah, 4 years younger than me, and she worked in the department next to mine. As we talked, a voice from the other side of the door called out, "Hey, is anyone there?" Peeking through the gap in the door, a voice said, "Hold on, we'll clear the way." A few folks moved carts and other obstacles, enabling our safe exit. Luckily, the earthquake's damage was minimal, just some items had fallen from shelves and desks. By the next day, we were back to normal. From then on, my days were filled with routine work. Yet, I would often bump into Sarah, whom I'd met in the storage room, in the hallway, lobby, or the staff cafeteria. I hadn't realized it before, but we had crossed paths frequently within the company. We began greeting each other whenever we met. One day during lunch, while I was eating in the cafeteria, Sarah approached, asking, "Mind if I join you?" We took that opportunity to express our gratitude for that day we spent trapped together. It seemed we never found the right moment to stop and talk about it before. Sarah also wanted to thank me, saying, "I'm so glad you were there with me that day. I'm not sure if I could have gotten out if I was alone in the storage room. You really saved me." From then on, I often chatted with Sarah. Due to our lunch breaks frequently overlapping, we'd often eat together or have coffee afterwards. Though I was always a bit shy and struggled to converse, Sarah was always proactive in starting conversations, so there was never a lull. Eventually, we began to occasionally dine out in the evenings. It felt strange for a socially awkward guy like me to be out and about, engaging in so much conversation. Somehow, I just clicked with Sarah. After one of our meals, Sarah opened up about her feelings for me. It was the first time that someone confessed to me like that. I was taken aback, but that's when I realized my own feelings. Soon, Sarah and I started dating. Things moved swiftly, and before we knew it, we were discussing marriage. After a successful proposal, I visited Sarah's parents. On the day of the visit, Sarah's parents, who also lived with her older brother and his wife, warmly welcomed us. While I had planned for a brief visit, they insisted on having dinner together, making me feel right at home. Being a man of few words, I barely answered the family's questions. They even inquired about my family. I answered all their questions honestly. However, a few days after the visit, I received a message from Sarah. Apparently, Sarah's sister-in-law, Lisa, wanted to have a word with me. I wondered if they might be against our marriage, but that wasn't the case. I was told we'd discuss the matter in person, so a meeting was arranged between Sarah, Lisa, and me. On the appointed day, we met at a quiet cafe. Let me get straight to the point. Lisa began, then started asking detailed questions about my mother. When she passed away, her name, maiden name, place of birth, blood type, and more. She also inquired why I didn't have any grandparents or relatives. I answered everything within my knowledge. After a pause, she said, "Look at these photos. Does this woman look like your mother?" She showed me two pictures of a young woman who unmistakably resembled my mom. After confirming the resemblance, she took another breath and asked, "You're an only child, right?" When I replied yes, Lisa gave a quiet nod. She took another deep breath and said, "Let me tell you the truth about you," looking me straight in the eye. Confused, I waited for her next words. "This woman, she's my mother." Lisa's lips trembled as she spoke. I was in disbelief, asking her to repeat herself over and over. But she was unequivocal. "She's my mother." What does that mean? I tried to organize my thoughts as I listened to Lisa's story. Lisa had been told she was an orphan and was raised by her grandparents. One day, while cleaning up, she found a photograph. When she showed it to her grandmother, she hesitated at first but eventually admitted that the woman in the photo was Lisa's mother. She also explained why Lisa had been separated from her parents. To start with, Lisa had a brother 2 years her senior. Their mother became pregnant with him at 16. Both parents were the same age, meaning the father was also 16 at the time. The mother was determined to have the child, and the father intended to marry her when he turned 18. However, this was met with strong opposition from the mother's parents. These grandparents were strict and believed in strict adherence to family traditions. Yet, the young mother persisted and gave birth at the age of 16. Afterward, while juggling jobs having dropped out of high school, she entrusted childcare either to daycares or her parents. The father, on the other hand, continued attending high school while working part-time jobs to make ends meet. Both were genuinely committed to raising their child. Despite the continuing objections from the grandparents, the young couple had decided they would marry once they turned 18. Then, Lisa was conceived. The news infuriated the grandparents, but the baby was eventually born. This birth took place when both parents were 18 and they intended to register their marriage that very year. However, the grandparents staunchly opposed, especially against the father, whom they perceived as the culprit for their daughter's teenage pregnancy. Frictions became a daily affair, primarily revolving around the children's future and caregiving. They chastised their young daughter, often remarking, "You're just a child who had a child. Listen to what we say." Still, the determined mother, aiming to keep her family intact, was met with a stern "Leave the kids and get out. You're disowned." Numerous attempts were made to reconcile, and she tried taking her children with her, but the grandparents stood firm. Ultimately, she was estranged without any contact with her children. I was shocked to learn about the tumultuous past of my parents. And the fact that I had a sibling was a revelation to me. Incidentally, the grandfather has since passed away, and the grandmother, though still alive, is now in a nursing home. Lisa, without mentioning anything about me, had inquired again about her mother. Moreover, given that our grandmother's surname was quite unique, she was certain that they were blood-related. The week after hearing this story, I, along with Sarah and Lisa, visited our mother's childhood home. Presently, my elder brother's family is living in our grandmother's house, and it was the first time I was introduced to him. Following that, Lisa and I went to the nursing home where our grandmother resided. Although hesitant to meet her at first, we decided to have a conversation. Initially, our grandmother couldn't believe my existence and was taken aback, but noticing the resemblance I bore to my mother, she mentioned how much I looked like her. Our grandmother was unaware that my mother had married my father, and she certainly had no knowledge of the tragic car accident that took my mother's life. Hearing this, tears streamed down our grandmother's face. She deeply regretted disowning her daughter due to parental pride and expressed her desire to apologize if given a chance to meet her daughter again. The town where my mother and Lisa grew up was quite a distance from my current residence. Yet, little did I know, my sister lived so close by. That year was not just significant for meeting Sarah, but also for discovering and connecting with blood relatives like my siblings and grandmother. Fast forward a few years. "Daddy, no, Dad's playing with me. Daddy, Daddy. All right, let's all play together, okay?" I was surrounded by my children, unable to move. My kids really love their daddy. Oh, and don't get me started on me. I'm crazy about him too. Sarah teased as she too hugged me. "Come on, Sarah, not you too." Everyone giggles and clings to me. Now 38, I'm living a lively life with my 3 beloved sons and my cherished wife, Sarah. And we're soon expecting our 4th child. Since then, I've been in touch with my sister living nearby, and her 3 sons and my children play together as if they were siblings. Though my elder brother lives far away, we, along with my sister's family, visit him annually during the summer break without fail. Interestingly, my brother and I have similar facial features, and even more intriguing is how much my brother's children resemble younger me. When we look closely, all the children share striking similarities. We all look as if we were born from the same parents. We often jest. The bond of blood is indeed mysterious. Despite never having lived together with my siblings, our interactions felt natural from the start. Given how I was never adept at social interactions, me being able to interact well with my siblings surprises me. Having once believed I would live a life of solitude, never did I imagine that in just a few years, I would be surrounded by the warmth of a family. Life truly is unpredictable. I aim to cherish this unexpected happiness. I love the early mornings at work. I think I enjoy the serenity of the atmosphere. I water the potted plants by the window and crack open the slightly ajar window to let in some fresh air. Since I started working at this company, this routine hasn't changed. My name is Tom, and I'm 30 years old. I work in sales for a major general trading company. My sales performance is consistently the lowest month after month. My superiors and colleagues don't think highly of me, believing I lack motivation. In reality, I'm not interested in work or climbing the corporate ladder. When I accompany colleagues on sales calls, I'm more of a hindrance, so my main task has become taking care of the little errands for my colleagues who are out doing sales. Work moderately, live moderately, and live quietly without drawing attention are my mottos. However, someone came this year in the transfers who seemed determined to shake up my quiet life. "You are early again today, Tommy," with that cheerful greeting. Her slender arms wrap around my neck. I felt the warmth of her body against my back. "Good morning, Jessica. You're energetic early in the morning." I unwrapped her arms from around my neck without making it seem too harsh. Her name is Jessica. She's our supervisor who transferred here this spring. Having spent time abroad, she speaks 3 languages fluently and is 4 years older than me, a true talent. She's always cheerful, and her straightforward personality makes her popular among both men and women. She's also perfect as a superior, and those who initially complained about having a female boss surrendered within a week of her appointment. Or, "Why so cold? There's no one else here." Jessica pouted after I pushed her arms away. For some reason, she's taken a liking to me. I'm just a regular office worker who doesn't excel at his job. She, on the other hand, is a go-getter and a real career woman. I have no idea why she's so fixated on someone like me. "It's not about that, Jessica. You're a bit too touchy-feely for my liking." I've recently become more assertive in voicing this. In the beginning, I was just bewildered and didn't know how to react. At first, you'd blush and it was so cute, but lately, you've gotten a bit cheeky. Jessica took a seat next to my desk, leaning back in the chair to its fullest extent. I could hear the sound of her spine cracking. She probably worked late into the night yesterday. She's usually the first one to come in after me. And she's probably the last one to leave in our department. "You know I have to spell things out for you, right?" I said with a sigh. "Speaking your mind is fine, but treating me unfairly, that's not cool," she retorted, puffing out her cheeks, and she gave a little kick to the chair I was sitting in. Her gesture reminded me of a sulking child. It's a side of her completely different from her professional demeanor. Honestly, I can't wrap my head around why such a talented and beautiful woman, 4 years my senior, is so aggressively pursuing me. The entire department has come to recognize and accept this dynamic between Jessica and me. I find this situation deeply concerning. I constantly worry that being around a guy like me, who lacks motivation, might tarnish her reputation. Yesterday, I even found myself making a wish at the local chapel, hoping to get back my peaceful days. Anyway, no excessive PDA. I told her in as cold a voice as I could muster, and a disgruntled "all right" came in response. Truth be told, it's not unpleasant having a beauty like her make advances. However, the drawbacks are significant. I get jealous comments from male colleagues, and recently, from a junior Emily. Time and time again, I stress that I just want to lead a peaceful, inconspicuous life. While sneaking a glance at the back of Jessica, who was stylishly dressed in a slim-fitting pantsuit, I sighed again. Watching her, always so cheerful after having spent time abroad as a child, reminds me of a past I'd rather forget. I think only the HR folks at work know this, but I'm actually a returnee from overseas. I spent my childhood constantly moving from one foreign country to another because of my dad's job. I didn't come back to the US until I was 15. Being right smack in the middle of my teenage years probably didn't help. Having lived in multiple countries, I was a social butterfly. I thought, I'll fit right into an American high school in no time. But reality wasn't so straightforward. I made friends quickly, and at first, I think my life in the US was smooth sailing. The one person who brought my high school life crashing down was a single girl. Hell began when I was in 11th grade, and she ended up in my class. For whatever reason, she had it out for me. Stuff like, he's flaunting that he lived abroad, or he's too cocky and flashy, or he just doesn't get it. Being the queen bee at the top of the school hierarchy, she probably thought she could get her way with everything. The moment she spoke against me, my life changed. No one would talk to me or even make eye contact. Everyone was scared stiff of her. Then, I realized, if I tried to talk to my close friends, they'd get a hard time too. From that moment, I became invisible. It lasted until graduation. I declared to my dad that I would never attend a college in the US around that time. True to my word, I left for the UK right after high school graduation. Later on, I got into University of Oxford. I only came back to the US because my mom wanted me to. My mom, who was in poor health, I think was feeling a bit vulnerable. I wasn't mature enough to refuse such a request from her. Remembering my high school days, I made a promise to myself on the day I started my job to always stay under the radar. A presence that disrupts my peaceful days. What should I do about Jessica? A thorn in my side. Then, one day, an even bigger problem stood before me. It was a scorcher of a day, and my colleagues, who had been outside on assignments, were shutting down cold water as soon as they returned to the office. I was in charge of odd jogs, so I prepared drinks for them, chilled wet towels, and did everything I could to support. I always made sure never to take center stage in my duties. Tom, a customer specifically asked for you. My junior, Emily, approached me with a puzzled look on her face. It made sense. Nobody had ever specifically asked to speak to me for a business discussion before. Emily seemed a bit worried as she whispered to me in a voice others couldn't hear, "Are you okay?" "I'm not sure, but I'll meet with them anyway." Trying to reassure her, I lightly pat little Emily's shoulder. Yet she seemed to remain concerned and followed behind me. It looked like she intended to join me. I felt like a failure of a senior to have my junior this worried about me. Taking a deep breath, I said, "Excuse me," before knocking. A young woman's voice from the reception room responded, "Please come in." At that moment, cold sweat ran down my back, and I felt a slight dizziness. I instinctively wanted to run away. Not understanding why, the moment I bravely opened the door, I was frozen on the spot. "How many years has it been? You didn't even attend graduation. I was worried if you were even alive." Bright red lips uttered those words. Despite her flashy makeup, it suited her queenly demeanor perfectly. Lucy, why? Lounging on the reception room sofa was the very person who had brought about my downfall, Lucy. She was the last person I ever wanted to see. I probably looked quite shaken. From behind, Emily asked again, "Are you okay?" I responded with "I'm fine" and took a seat across from Lucy, saying, "Excuse me. When I saw you in the hallway earlier, I didn't think it was really you. I mean, who could have imagined back then that you'd be working for such a prestigious company?" her condescending and arrogant tone unchanged from our school days. She looked at me with a mocking upward glance and smirked. She seemed like a predator that had just spotted its prey, making my heart feel like it was going to jump out of my chest. Though I felt the need to say something, my mouth was dry and no words would come out. Lucy enjoyed my distress, grinning broadly. I tried to remind myself, I'm not that high school kid anymore. Excuse me, did my subordinate do something rude? I hadn't even noticed when Jessica entered the room, so hearing her voice nearly made me jump out of my skin. Who are you? Lucy asked with a frown, glaring at the sudden appearance. It seemed like she was annoyed, thinking her fun had been interrupted. I'm Jessica, Tom's supervisor. Tom rarely handles business meetings, so I hope he wasn't rude to you. Her face was smiling politely, but her eyes weren't. It felt like sparks were flying between Lucy and Jessica. After a tense moment, it was Lucy who broke first. Fine, I'll let it slide this time. Our companies have had a long-standing relationship since my father's time. Let's keep it that way. Lucy said, standing up and exiting the reception room with the click-clack of her heels. Quickly, Emily went to see Lucy out. The sound of the door slamming shut was the cue that allowed me to finally relax. Considering my unusual reaction, there would likely be questions from Jessica. The sinking feeling of having to explain my past to her weighed me down. Apparently, she's undergoing CEO training. She may come around again, but you don't have to deal with her, Tom. Let's have Emily grow into the role instead, Jessica said with a reassuring pat on my shoulder. Feeling the warmth of her hand, I was on the verge of tears. In the end, Jessica never asked me the reason I was upset that day, and we finished our day's work. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. At the meeting the next day, it was decided that Emily would handle Lucy's account. I was designated as her assistant. I briefly explained to Emily that Lucy and I were high school classmates. From the previous day's events, Emily seemed to have picked up on my reluctance to deal with Lucy. I'm truly grateful for Emily's hard work. She tried her best to cater to Lucy's needs so I wouldn't have to face her. If there was any mistake, as her senior, I'd have to represent the company in front of Lucy. Emily carefully continued the dealings with Lucy's firm. Initially, Lucy demanded me, but when she realized her requests were being denied, she began other tactics to annoy us. She started bringing non-native English speakers to business meetings. Sometimes just acquaintances, and at times, introduced as co-owners. Emily could handle Spanish, French, and Chinese. But occasionally, Lucy would bring along someone who spoke Italian, Portuguese, or Japanese, which Emily couldn't handle. In such cases, Jessica quickly stepped in to support Emily. I felt guilty watching this, knowing I couldn't help. I felt bad burdening my junior, Emily, and worrying Jessica. I kept thinking I was a failure as a professional. One day, our always cheerful Jessica was out sick with a fever. It's rare for her to call in sick, so everyone was concerned. According to Emily, she was overworked and sleep-deprived, leading to a weakened immune system, and she caught a cold. Though it was an unfortunate situation, I hope she'd take a good rest. If Jessica isn't here to help and Lucy brings someone I can't communicate with. Emily gazed anxiously at the words Jessica absent written on the whiteboard. And her fears became a reality. While I, who rarely goes out for client visits, was out assisting a colleague, Lucy suddenly arrived with a troublesome matter. When I returned to the office, I could hear Lucy berating Emily throughout the floor. Rushing into the room, Emily was flustered, being yelled at by Lucy. It seemed that today's negotiation required Italian, Emily's weakness. You do realize this is a trading company, right? How do you work here not knowing Italian? Or are you just looking down on us? Yelling at Emily without a second thought, Lucy's face didn't show a hint of anger. She was grinning with a nasty smile, seemingly enjoying the situation to the fullest. It looked as if she had found her prey. "Your usual helpful supervisor isn't here today. I heard she's feeling under the weather. Can't even take care of her own health. That's so third-rate." Beside the sarcastic Lucy, a young Italian who didn't seem to understand what was going on was nervously watching Emily and Lucy. He was probably dragged here against his will by Lucy. "Well, speak up. Can't do business with someone I introduce you to, or are you going to apologize?" Explaining I don't understand. With Emily's head lowered, Lucy continued to tap her on the back of the head rhythmically with a rolled-up document. Emily's back visibly shivered. Colleagues also observed the situation from a distance, running around searching for someone in the other departments who could speak Italian. Meanwhile, Lucy's attitude kept escalating. "Can't even explain. Come here right now." Saying this, she forcefully pulled Emily off the couch. The moment I saw that, something snapped inside me. "Is there an issue here?" I quickly brushed off the hand Lucy had on Emily's shoulder and shielded her behind me. "Oh, Tom, long time no see. Are you here to play in her place?" Lucy, finding a new target, had a cruel glint in her eyes. Ignoring her completely, I addressed to the flustered young Italian man. "Are you interested in doing business with our company?" Of course, I wasn't speaking in English. Italian flowed naturally from my lips. The young man seemed relieved to finally hear his native language. On the other hand, Lucy was stunned, staring at me in disbelief. The young man excitedly began explaining the plan he had in mind to me. Looking at me engaged in the conversation, Emily seemed genuinely surprised. All this time, she thought I was just some guy who did menial tasks by the window, but suddenly I was speaking Italian fluently and handling the negotiation. Can't blame her for being taken aback. During the negotiation, Lucy seemed to be glaring at me resentfully. In the end, the young man and I shook hands, laughed about the potential for a big deal, and wrapped up our discussion. Emily escorted the young man to the front door as he wanted to report the outcome to his boss right away. Back in the reception room, Lucy and I couldn't tear our eyes away from each other, locked in a stare down. "Nothing's changed with you. Still haven't grown up." I was the first to speak. The Lucy, who I once found intimidating, didn't scare me at all today. Perhaps successfully navigating that tough negotiation boosted my confidence. "Excuse me, what are you trying to say?" Lucy, seemingly caught off guard by my comment, retorted in a flustered manner. She still carried her usual high and mighty, queen bee attitude, but I could sense a hint of panic and fear. "What I'm saying is that you're acting childish, still pulling the same stunts as you did in high school without considering your age." Once I started, I couldn't hold back. Words I'd been holding in for so long came pouring out. "Oh, so you always have someone by your side because you haven't improved your Spanish at all. Must be tough babysitting an inept heiress like you. Don't you realize you're a burden?" I'd figured out pretty early on that Lucy wasn't proficient in Spanish. She probably can't speak Chinese either. Being the daughter of a trading company's CEO, Lucy likely had the stamp of failure pressed upon her. Acting tough probably masked her insecurities. I realize this now, maybe because I've grown up. "What do you know?" She hurled the papers she was holding at me, her voice shaking with anger. Her clenched fist trembled. "Just because you can effortlessly speak other languages, you think you're so great. Give me a break." Lucy's yelling sounded more like a desperate scream to me. Looking back to high school, I realized that the reason Lucy treated me so poorly was probably all due to her own insecurities. I only found out that her father was the CEO of a trading company after graduating from high school. I vaguely recalled that Lucy struggled greatly with her Spanish classes back then. but that's no excuse for the way she treated me. Deal with your own issues yourself. You're a grown-up after all." My words made Lucy's face turn beet red. She must have felt embarrassed being called out like that. She grabbed her bag from the couch and stormed out of the reception room, the sound of her heels echoing on the floor. I thought maybe I was a bit too harsh, but I didn't have the luxury of choosing my words carefully, and it's not like I didn't have any grudges. I hope she forgives me for being a tad bit sharp. Why did you keep quiet about being able to speak? Are you still hiding something from me?" Suddenly, I heard Jessica's voice from behind and instinctively turned around. There stood Jessica, looking pale. Her lips were of a turble color. She glared at me with an upward gaze. Jessica, you look terrible." "Of course I do. I'm still running a fever. Got called in despite that, but I'm glad I came. Got to see something interesting," she said as she gently took a seat next to me. Emily, who had just returned from seeing off some guests, saw Jessica and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" "Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Everyone, get back to your work," Jessica said and cleared the reception room. I braced myself for a reprimand. It's like I was neglecting my duty by claiming I couldn't do what I was supposed to do. I figured I'd have no right to complain even if I got fired for negligence. "You're such a lying prince." Those unexpected words came out of Jessica's mouth. I was dumbfounded and could only utter, "What? Don't you remember me? That's cruel." I looked closely at Jessica's face. She must be feverish. Her face was pale, only the area around her eyes was slightly red. It looked like she had been crying. Suddenly, memories flooded back. "Oh, we've met before, right?" I was certain now. The girl with swollen red eyes, crying in a corner of a park in a foreign country, Europe. That image overlaid with Jessica before me. "Oh, in Germany." To my exclamation, she smiled warmly. "You finally remember. Since that day, you've been my prince on a white horse." When I approached the crying girl, she whispered in a tiny voice, "I don't understand." She was acting tough, saying she only needed to speak English and didn't need friends in a foreign land, but tears kept pouring from her big eyes. Being addressed in English must have comforted her. When I was still a young boy, I confidently told her, tears streaming down her face from trying to put on a brave front, a piece of advice my father once gave me. If you can speak multiple languages, the world becomes so much bigger for you. It's a waste to just confine yourself to a small world. Just try mustering up a little courage and strike up a conversation. I remember looking at her, clearly older than me, and proudly saying those words. Her tears stopped, and I felt relieved seeing that. I always wanted to meet the boy from that time again. I remembered his face and name. "I thought you looked similar, but your personality seems so different now. I wondered if you really were my prince." Chuckling, Jessica remarked. The day after I met her, she told me she had gathered the courage to speak to a classmate at school. It was as if a spell had been cast, making the invisible barriers between them crumble instantly. Having parents with jobs that took them all around the world, she had been moving from place to place herself. Comparing our overseas stints, we realized there were times when we almost crossed paths, quite the close calls. I always thought we'd have a fateful reunion overseas, but to meet here of all places. It's hardly romantic, she pouted, looking somewhat childish. Truth be told, I often went back to that park, hoping to find the girl I had seen crying. But never finding her, I moved to the next country. After returning to the States, I was so caught up with my own life that I never thought of her. It's quite a curious connection we have. I wish I could have come up with something more eloquent, but that was all I could muster. Don't you think it's more like fate than just a curious connection? You get what I mean, right? considering her perspective, she might be right. I always believed, with no real basis, that I could pull fate towards me. Impressive, right? She boasted, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Leaning in close to my face, she gave a wide grin. You don't think you can escape, do you, Tommy? You're the one who expanded my world, so you have the responsibility to stay by my side in this vast world. Understand? Such a forceful approach was very like her. But I didn't mind it at all. With the world being so vast, I wonder how I got caught. Don't you think you're getting a little cheeky? The image of her laughing so hard she'd fall over in a wedding dress was a scene for a not-so-distant future. Running from her, who had strong-armed fate into granting this chance encounter, seemed impossible. I guess if this were a novel, it'd be a happy ending. It's been a long time since I've had the morning rush hour. The subway was jam-packed. As I got off at the station, large groups of strangers moved like a flock of sheep, each heading to their own destination. In the midst of that crowd, I truly felt, I'm back in New York. It was my first day back at the headquarters in New York after working in Nebraska for 3 years. Nebraska had its own charms. But I've always had a soft spot for the hustle and bustle of New York. It wasn't because I messed up or got demoted that I was transferred to Nebraska. The company I joined right out of college believed in sending their bright ones away to gain experience, and working in a regional office was a stepping stone to promotions. So, at 35, I was assigned to work in Nebraska, and after 3 years, I was called back to headquarters where a position as a deputy director awaited me. So, professionally, everything was going great for me. But there was one thing bothering me in my personal life. At this age, I was still single and didn't even have a girlfriend. Up until just before the transfer, I had a girlfriend whom I'd been with for almost 10 years, considering marriage. But whether it was a phase of fatigue or just growing apart, we broke up when I got the transfer. When I reported to my old department, everyone welcomed me back with applause. Especially the director, who had been instrumental in my career path, was overjoyed, saying, "Next, I'll be the executive director, and you'll be the director." And that evening, a welcome back party was thrown in my honor, orchestrated by the director. Not to pry into your personal life, but do you have any marriage plans, Alex? The director asked during the party. Ever since I joined the company, I've been in the same department as the director, who was just a supervisor at the time. We went out for drinks countless times. However, we rarely talked about our personal lives. Oh, sorry about that, I might have been too nosy. Well, it's not really that, I mean, I didn't have anyone in my plans. Then I told him that I had broken up with my long-term girlfriend just before I was transferred to another state. Upon hearing this, the director felt guilty, wondering if it was because he recommended the transfer. I replied, sooner or later, we would have broken up anyway. So, you're not seeing anyone now? No, not for the past 3 years. When I said that, for some reason, the director had a pleased smile on his face. Well then, I've got a perfect match for you, Alex. How about an arranged date? Caught off guard, I almost spit out my drink. An arranged date? Who does that these days? Actually, my nosy relative asked me to find someone for a match. Saying that, the director rummaged through his bag, which he had placed on his lap. I don't think arranged dates are really my thing. Just take a look at her photo. She's a catch, really. Here. He handed me a photo he had been carrying in his bag. Oh wow, she's really something. The woman in the photo was just as the director described, strikingly beautiful, with sharp eyes, both wise and elegant. She was exactly my type. I can't just introduce anyone without thinking it through, especially when it's such a big deal for someone. But Alex, what do you say? It's okay to refuse. Want to meet her? It was hard to decline the director's proposal, especially considering all the help he's provided over the years. Yet, more than that, I was captivated by the woman in the photo and simply wanted to meet her. The following weekend, at a somewhat renowned hotel lounge in downtown New York, under the watchful eyes of the director's meddling relative, the arranged date took place. I was in a suit, she was in a dress. Her name is Catherine, and she's 35, 3 years younger than me. She used to work in an administrative position at a major electronics company. After about 15 minutes, our companions left the table, and it was just Catherine and me. I pondered on what to say next as I carefully admired her face. She looked even prettier than in her photos. "Alex, there's something I wanted to ask first." "Oh, what is it?" "Alex, have you ever been on an arranged date before?" I was actually thinking of asking her the same thing. I told her it was my first time and asked her the same. She also said it was her first. "With someone as charming as you, I'm surprised you'd need to go on an arranged date. Wouldn't you have plenty of suitors?" "Oh, you're too kind." Her tone was gentle, but Catherine gave me a stern look. She probably thought I was being insincere and got upset. But that assertive side of hers was quite attractive to me. "Did I say something you didn't like?" "I wasn't trying to butter you up, honestly." I then shared with her about my long-term relationship ending due to a job in another state, how I came back to the headquarters, got this arranged date offer from my department head, and how her photo made me want to meet her. At first, I laughed at the idea of an arranged date, but it's just another way to meet people. Even those group dates I went to when I was younger felt like group arranged dates. As I continued to share, Catherine's expression softened. "You broke up with your previous girlfriend 3 years ago, right? When in September? Sometime in September, I guess." With my answer, Catherine smirked. Curious, I looked at her. "Actually, I broke up with my long-term boyfriend in September, 3 years ago too." I was at a loss for words at Catherine's unexpected confession. "Did you get over your ex?" "Yes, of course. And you?" "Yes, a long time ago," Catherine said, smiling. I couldn't help but smile too. And so, our arranged date came to an end, and we agreed to meet again the following weekend. I was so eager to see Catherine again that I felt restless the entire week. Every night after work, I'd think about what to wear. Never one to care much about fashion, I was quite indecisive. As I was looking through my closet, I decided on a suit without a tie. And then a thought popped into my head. What about underwear? I quickly came back to my senses. I'm such an idiot. Worrying about that was way too premature. For our first date, we met at 4 p.m. near an established department store close to the hotel where we had our arranged date. We planned to stroll around town for a bit and then find a decent restaurant for dinner. I could have booked a place in advance, but since I didn't know Catherine's preferences, I thought we'd decide on the go. Of course, I did some research and had shortlisted a few places that seemed good. So, I arrived in that town over an hour earlier than our scheduled time and checked the location of the restaurant I had in mind. After doing that, I went to the place where I was supposed to meet her, but even after our 4 p.m. meeting time, she was nowhere in sight. 10 minutes passed, then 20 minutes. I thought she might have stood me up. I was about to give up and head home when I started crossing the street. I thought of calling her to give her a resentment while walking. Then, from the other side of the intersection, I spotted her walking towards me with her cell phone in one hand. She noticed me too and waved enthusiastically. I rushed towards her, and we both stopped right in the middle of the crossing. "I was thinking of calling you and heading home because you were so late." "I was there too. I was waiting for you right on time over there." I said that, pointing to our meeting spot. Suddenly, she burst out laughing. The pedestrian crosswalk signal started flashing with a beeping sound. We both ran back to the sidewalk. "Alex, were you waiting over there?" I looked back at the beer hall named Penguin that she pointed to and silently nodded. "I was here. I was waiting here." What she pointed out ahead was the department store we had chosen as our rendezvous point. Right in front of its entrance stood the department store's symbol, a penguin statue. In other words, we had agreed to meet by the penguin in front of the department store. However, I mistook it for a beer hall named Penguin across the street from the department store, while Catherine thought of it as the penguin symbol at the entrance of the store. That's a funny mix-up. Glad we didn't miss each other. Yeah, seriously. Now that I think about it, I'm thirsty. How about we grab a drink at that beer hall to pay our respects to the penguin? Sounds good. Let's do it. Because it was a weekend, the beer hall was already nearly 80% full even though it was just before 5 p.m. We ordered a big pint of draft beer and some hot dogs to snack on. We had another good laugh about the penguin confusion and then started sharing more about ourselves. Turns out, the station nearest to Catherine's old place and where I used to live up to 3 years ago was the same. There were 3 lines at that station, but we both used the same one for our daily commute. I always bought a sports newspaper from the kiosk in the mornings. You mean the kiosk on the far west side of the platform? Yes, that's the one. As I nodded, Catherine mentioned she frequented that kiosk too. She always bought an energy drink there. I remembered. I hadn't noticed her face, but I had seen a woman buying that drink several times. When I guessed the brand of her energy drink, Catherine looked at me in surprise. "Did you ever bump hands with someone when paying?" Still in shock, Catherine nodded. I checked her commuting times. Our schedules overlapped. So, we might have met at that kiosk at the station. I felt a strange connection with Catherine. And we planned another date for the following weekend. For our second date, we managed to meet on time without getting the location wrong. We had a meal at a casual diner and then shared a drink at a relaxed bar. I was quite the drinker, but she could hold her own as well. The conversation shifted to hobbies. I mentioned that while I hadn't been into it recently, I used to be really into watching plays a few years ago. I'm talking about small-time theater groups putting on shows at little venues, nothing big. I didn't particularly have a favorite troupe. I'd just randomly attend a theater, pick up a flyer, and if it piqued my interest, I'd go watch that play next. It was the same old story. Depending on the play I went to see, sometimes it was fascinating, and other times it was a letdown. The hits and misses varied greatly. I started mentioning the names of the troupes I remembered, saying this one was a hit, that one was a miss, and another was a complete dud. You've probably never heard of these troupes, have you? Ever since I began talking about the theater companies, Catherine seemed to speak less. I wondered if I bored her with topics she wasn't interested in, when I do know one of those troupes. Really, that one, the total dud. I thought that company was as obscure as it gets. You know about such a company? When I asked, after a brief pause, she made a sour face and said, "That theater group, it's the one my ex, who I broke up with 3 years ago, was involved in." I was taken aback and cleared my throat. In situations like this, should I take back what I said about being way off, or should I dig myself deeper? While I was at a loss for words, she spoke up first. "I think I was there at the theater when you came to watch. I was helping out at the ticket counter." Well, I'm not so sure about that. I remember arriving just in the nick of time that day, barely making it for the show. Our second date ended on an awkward note. Yet, we made plans to meet again the following weekend. Our third date began with a walk in a park in New York, known for its beautiful cherry blossoms in the spring. I used to come here often for company picnics. I've been here a few times with friends. I decided not to ask who those friends were. It might get awkward again if they were from the theater group. Although it wasn't cherry blossom season, the park was adorned with various flowers. Admiring flowers wasn't really my thing. So, I quickly grew bored of the walk. Suddenly, carried by the wind, a savory aroma wafted towards us. It was coming from a food stand a little further ahead. "That smells delicious," she whispered. Hearing her, I turned to look at her. "I'm sorry, I've always been more of a pie than flowers person." Shrugging and smiling. Quickly, I added, "To be honest, I was getting a bit bored looking at the park's greenery too. How about we go get some hot dogs?" Nodding in agreement, we walked briskly towards the food stall, our hips swaying as if we were race walkers. We bought a hot dog each and a can of beer, then sat on a nearby bench. We idly watched families playing on the park's grass, couples, and people walking their dogs. Taking a sip of the beer and a bite of the hot dog. Suddenly, I noticed a particularly large cherry tree right next to the bench we were sitting on. Oh, I think it was around here, that time. Was it the year before I transferred out of state, or the year before that? I had a company picnic around here. Glancing around, I noticed a public restroom to our back left. It was definitely here. A new guy was in charge of securing the spot for a cherry blossom party. He told us that it was right in front of the restroom. I remember yelling at him, wondering why he'd pick such a smelly spot. That's thoughtful of him. When you're drinking, it's convenient to be close to the restroom, right? She had a point. However, I doubted the newbie had thought that far ahead when choosing the spot. Speaking of which, I once came here for a picnic and witnessed a fight between two guys over the restroom line. I had a similar experience and asked if it was in this park. Yes, it was this park. It might have even been that restroom. When I asked about the situation at that time, a young man who looked like a heavily intoxicated college student tried to cut in line for the restroom. A middle-aged man in a suit, who was in line, confronted the young man. Then, a scuffle ensued. That's when another man, who seemed to be an acquaintance of the man in the suit, rushed over and managed to defuse the situation. Listening to her story, the memory of that time vividly came back to me. That man in the suit was my director, and the guy who stepped in later, that was me. Yours truly. You're kidding. You were there that day. Both of us were surprised and impressed by the unexpected connection from our past. A few days later, after work, my director invited me for a drink. We went to our usual large bar. As soon as we sat down, my director said, "How's it going with your arranged date? I heard you've met her a couple of times." I wasn't sure how to respond. I believed I had a good relationship with her. However, we had only been on 3 dates. I was indeed attracted to her, and I wanted to believe that she had some affection for me as well. But it was uncertain how things would turn out in the future. I talked to her, and it turns out we've unknowingly crossed paths before, I shared. Upon hearing this, he had a pleased expression on his face, as if to suggest it was a perfect match. Sounds like fate, doesn't it? Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind. What if she's in this bar tonight, too? There had been a few times in the past when we unexpectedly ran into each other. But if we met in this bar tonight, it wouldn't just be a coincidence. It might be destiny. I excused myself to him, saying I needed to use the restroom, and started searching the expansive bar. It was a tavern near the office. It wasn't surprising to see familiar faces. However, there were mostly strangers. That's to be expected, I thought. Especially in a bustling city like New York, What were the odds of running into that one woman conveniently? I decided to give up on the silly fantasy and return to where my boss was seated. Just as I was about to turn around, there you are. She was standing right in front of me. "It's a coincidence, isn't it?" she remarked. I shook my head and replied, "Does it really feel like just a coincidence to you?" She stared back at me with a broad smile on her face.